And you know what my dad used to say to us when we were kids? He'd look us in the eye. We never understood like kind of where this was coming from. But he'd say, never forget how good you have it. Never forget how lucky you are. You know? It's hard for children to see that based on kind of where you live and where you grow up. So we just grew up, and we grew older. We went to high school, we graduated, I moved out of the house, I met a girl, I got a job, I settled down, and life was just going according to plan. It culminated in the most beautiful day of my life when surrounded by 150, I think I got to be on stage maybe to click, so I'll go back. Surrounded by 150 of our closest family and friends, I got married in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario. No one likes wine in this room. Just kidding. And so it was a beautiful day. It was a nice, beautiful day, and it made for a really beautiful year. The next year, I graduated from school, and I went on a 10,000-kilometer road trip with my best friend, Chris. We drove down the east coast of the States, across the south, eating a lot of biscuits and gravy and hush puppies and all this stuff, and up the Pacific Coast Highway. How many people here have ever done this drive, Pacific Coast Highway, before? Highway 1, California, Oregon. So we've got a few people that have done it. It's a beautiful drive. Other than the fact that my friend Chris was addicted to his cell phone the whole time. Do you know anybody like that? Right now, the average person touches their cell phone 2,500 times a day. It's more of a constant fondle. 5 years ago, we used our smartphones for 18 minutes a day. In 2018, the new data has come out, and it says that we now use our smartphones for 4 hours and 20 minutes a day. My number one tip is to download an app called Moment, M-O-M-E-N-T. It's totally free. All this does is at 12 p.m. every day, it just tells you how long you were on your screen the day before. Our cell phones are getting in the way of our happiness. So I come home to Toronto. After all this road trip, I'm married a couple years by this time. I graduated from school. I've got this business degree. I'm starting up this job. It was mentioned I work at Walmart, and everything's going according to plan. When things go the way you want them to in life, we call it planning. And when things go the way you don't, we call it change. Change. And at this time in my life, I had the two biggest changes I'd ever experienced. First off was the marriage. My wife and I had the respect, we had the trust, we had the admiration, we had everything you're supposed to have on paper when you get into a new relationship, when you get into a new marriage. But it turns out that something was missing. And one day I drove home from Walmart, and my wife was waiting for me on the front porch of our house. And if you ever had that experience before of getting home to your own house and somebody's waiting for you outside, it's like, I can't quite tap this thing, but your heart just skips a beat. So she sat me down on the front porch, and she summoned a lot of courage, through a lot of tears to say, we've been married 2 years, and I feel like I need to see a future together with you for the rest of my life if we should start talking about having kids and start settling down a little bit more. And I got to be honest with you, Neil, I don't know if I'm totally there. I don't know if I'm feeling that. I don't know if I'm deeply in love with you anymore. And if I feel that way, I think the most honest thing to do, most respectful thing to do, is to ask you if you'd be willing to get a divorce. And I don't know how many people in this room have had that experience, but it's heartbreaking, and you're in shock, and you're like trying to figure out how you're going to move one step forward, and how I'm going to sell my house, and what am I going to tell my friends. And at this exact moment, something worse was also happening in the background. My best friend Chris, who I just showed you that picture of on the Pacific Coast Highway, he'd been quietly battling mental illness for a long time. And you guys know this as well as everyone does. It's 1 in 4 of us in Canada or the U.S. that now suffers from mental illness, which means like over 100 people in this room right now. I talked to Chris on that Sunday night about the TV show we watched that evening, and sadly, that was the last time I spoke to him. His sister called me at work the next morning to tell me that overnight, Chris had very suddenly taken his own life. And for anyone in this room who has lost a family member or a friend via suicide, it's like there's just no words, there's no emotions. You're left with doubt and wonder and did I do something wrong? What could I have done differently? And how did I not notice these things? You're left with all these questions just spinning in your head, and you can't do anything because the person's not there anymore. At the same time this was happening, I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to sell my house? How am I going to process this divorce. Where am I going to live? I've never lived alone before. I've never lived in a big city before. I guess I got to find like an apartment in sort of downtown Toronto. And I was like a real kind of wreck, really. I actually lost 40 pounds at this time due to stress. And you know what everybody at Walmart was saying to me in the hallway? You look great. What's your secret? No food, no sleep. That's what we say to people when they lose weight, right? I was just thinking to myself one day, I'm like, you know what? As you're going through challenges, you're going through pain in your life, you always think, you have these little moments of like inspiration. You're like, you know what? Today's the day. I remember driving home one night. I was like, today's the day. I'm gonna flip a switch. I'm gonna turn over a new leaf. I'm gonna change the channel. So I get home from work, and I grab the remote control and I turn on CNN. Don't do that. It's all bad news. Everything on TV is bad news. Everything in the newspaper is bad news. I only had one place left to go. That was the internet. So I go to the internet. I type in how to start a blog into Google, and I click the I'm feeling lucky button that no one ever clicks. And 10 minutes later, I start up a tiny website called 1000awesomethings.com. Like, just to put a smile on my face before I go to sleep so I can sleep. Because, you can't sleep one night, then you can't sleep the next 3 nights. So I come home from work. I start writing about waiters and waitresses who bring you free refills without asking. Awesome. And then I come home the next day, start writing about getting called up to the dinner buffet first at a wedding. And I'm East Indian. There's like 300 tables at a wedding. That's a big deal. And then I'm like, okay, how about wearing warm underwear from just out of the dryer? Slow nods from the guys in the front. Hitting a string of green lights when you're late for work. Or finally peeing after holding it forever. These things we all know and love, but we just don't talk about enough. And the thing is, 50,000 blogs are started a day around the world. So my blog was just one of the 50,000. Nobody read it except for my mom. Although I got excited when she forwarded it to my dad because my traffic doubled overnight. And then I got excited when they started sending it around, and it started getting tens of hits. In one day. It was amazing. And then it started getting hundreds, and then thousands, and then millions. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I got a phone call, and the voice at the other end of the line said, "You just won the Best Blog in the World award." I'm like, that sounds totally fake. Is this the Nigerian prince? But it turns out it was real. The International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences awarded me the Webby Award for Best Blog in the World. They flew me down to New York City. They paraded me down a red carpet between Martha Stewart and Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, Sarah Silverman. I go on stage, I accept a Webby Award. I come home to Toronto, and there's 10 publishers waiting for me in my inbox, eager to turn 1000awesomethings.com into the Book of Awesome, the Book of Even More Awesome, the Book of Holiday Awesome, and then eventually that book I just gave to my friend from Oshawa, The Happiness Equation. And it sounds like the end of the happy story. This local kid kind of like goes through a hard time, and he writes this blog. He changes his life. His life gets he's a phoenix rising from the ashes. It feels like everything just sort of worked out. But the problem is, as everyone in here knows, when you're going through major changes in your life, in your work, in your family, it's not that easy, right? You don't just change overnight. I mean, it takes time. And at this exact moment, in front of 45 million Americans, live on the Today Show, Meredith Vieira looks me in the eyes, and she says to me, "So, Neil, how do we all learn to be happy like you?" I'm not going to lie. I felt like a bit of a fraud. I was the least happy person at the time that I knew of, and I've suddenly become the international spokesperson for happiness. I get home to Toronto after that interview in New York, and the front page of the Toronto Star says, "He's the Pied Piper of happiness." On the front, like A1, on the front page. And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm going to get asked this question for a long time. People are going to ask me. They're going to think I know this answer to like how to be happy. I don't know the answer. I just blogged about getting called up to a buffet. Right? Like, I don't know the answer, but I have to, someone was introduced from Human Resources. What was your name? Dave, you were introduced from HR. You know what they always say in HR. I worked in HR at Walmart for years. They always say, find your strengths right? This is what they tell you from HR. If you're going through a hard time, they're like, Strengths Finder. Find what you're good at and focus on that. Have you heard this before? Sounds familiar, right? So I was like, I need to find my strengths. I need to find what I'm good at. I need to answer this question everyone's going to be asking me in all these interviews and stuff. And you know what I'm good at? You met my father. You know what I'm good at? I'm East Indian. I'm really good at homework. I'm phenomenal at homework because my parents always gave me extra every Friday night. My dad's idea of a gift at the end of the school year was next year's math textbook. It's like a real present. He'd like wrap it up and stuff. So I was like, happiness, seriously? It's a vague word. It's like I don't even know how to kind of answer this question because it's like answering what love means. You take 3,000 years of philosophy to answer that, right? So I go to the library, and it turns out I find something very interesting. I find out that in the year 1996, two guys down in Pennsylvania named Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi invented a whole new area of research called positive psychology. What is this thing called positive psychology? It's the study of happiness. And from that point in 1996 to today, over 300 positive psychology studies had been done. Studying happiness, studying what actually makes you happy, really studying it, like kind of like big quantifiable research studies with tons of grants and funding, like at prominent universities. It's all this stuff. It's like, it sounds like a fantastic thing. So I read all these 300 studies. I like go through them all. And I realized, you know what? We can actually quantify this a lot more than I thought. If you actually were to take 20 minutes of your time every single day and do one of 3 exercises, you can actually change your brain. You can prime your brain for positivity every single morning or every single night before you go to bed, whatever you prefer. So on the next 3 slides, what I've brought for you are what I think from those 300 are the 3 most interesting and accessible studies. On the next 3 slides, I'm going to ask you to think about, as I show them to you, could I do one of these things? My criteria was it had to be simple, because I had to be able to do it myself. It had to be easy, like, kind of like I can't be too hard. I don't have to need all this fancy equipment and stuff like that. Some studies were like going into dreams, all this stuff. No, that's too complicated. And then it had to be 20 minutes a day or less, because the way I figured it is no one has any more time anyway. So what are 3 exercises that I could bring for you today that take 20 minutes a day or less to do? Okay, here's the very first one. There's 3, and it's a multiple choice question. So the first one is brisk nature walks. Professor Michael Babiak and team down also in Pennsylvania published an amazing report in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine. You know what they found out? They found out that if you actually do 3 20-minute nature walks a week, you outperform a group of people on antidepressants, and you outperform another group of people who are doing both the walking and taking the antidepressants. I mean, just the walks alone outperforms the other 2 groups. How many people here have a dog in this room? Show of hands. Who's got a dog? Dog lovers? Yeah, 2/3 of people have a dog. Do you ever have to walk the dog at night on a Friday, and it's the middle of winter, and your partner's in a Netflix coma, watching Black Mirror or whatever? And you're like, whose stupid dog is this? My kids made me get this dog. I don't even want to walk this dog, but you reluctantly you put on your boots and your hat and your scarf and your gloves and your jacket, and you get the leash and you get the little plastic bag, and you're like, I guess I'll go outside and walk this dog around the block. And by the time you go outside and you walk around, you come back home, how do you feel? Good. Re-energized, reinvigorated. You're ready to build a snowman. You're stomping your boots. The snow's going to come on. You're ready to go. Now, there's 2 key words in this study. Number 1 is brisk, and number 2 is nature. Nature, okay? So a walk through a forest is better than a mall. Some of you in the back are like, scratch that one. What's next, happy guy? You said you had 3. They've actually discovered this new chemical called phytosins, Phytocin, that are actually released from trees. Things that we all kind of knew already, but now they're putting a name around it. What do phytosins do? They reduce the cortisol, or stress hormone, level in your stomach, in your gut. Literally walking through a forest reduces your stress physiologically inside your body. So that's number 1, brisk nature walks. Number 2, The 20-minute replay, and this one is about journaling. Journaling. What is journaling? Journaling is where you kind of get a pen and a piece of paper and you write down a little story about your day. I really liked going for a little jog while I saw the speaker. Where'd the jogger go? She left. I thought that was great. I was like, jogging while watching a speech is pretty awesome. Had delicious scrambled eggs for breakfast. They filled me up with protein. I got to sit at a great fun table. I won a free book. Whatever you want to do, you just write down a little story about your day, a little highlight for 20 minutes, okay? Why does this work? Well, this study was done at the University of Texas by these two guys named Slatcher and Pennebaker. And they had couples in a relationship write down one good thing about their day at the end of the day. Just journal about it. After 3 weeks of doing that, they tested the couples after 3 months. Those who journaled were 50% more likely to stay together in their relationship after the 3-month mark. 3 months is a very long relationship at the University of Texas. Or any college campus, am I right? Come on. 3 months, so that's a long relationship. That's long term, baby. We actually did this study with the National MS Society in the States. We partnered with them, and we did it on patients with chronic neuromuscular pain. If we could convince those patients to journal for 6 straight weeks, then at the 6-month mark, we could reduce their pain medication by up to 50%. What? This sounds like total BS to me. I would walk into the Chapters bookstore or Kohl's bookstore when I was growing up in Oshawa, and I'd be like, nobody should buy those things. Do you know that wall of journals? When you walk in the front door, you're like, I'm East India. I was like, that's a waste of money. That's just a bunch of blank paper stapled together with a picture of a cat on the front of it for 20 bucks. Who would buy one of these things? Nobody should buy these things. Mama didn't raise no fool. I would never waste my money on that stuff. But then the moment of truth happened. You know what happened? My publisher calls me up from New York, and she's like, hey, Neil, we want to do the Journal of Awesome. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, we want to take the Book of Awesome logo from the cover of your book. We want to slap it on a bunch of blank paper, staple it together, and we want to sell it for 20 bucks. What do you think? I was like, yeah, that's right, Marilyn. Awesome. That's right. Mama didn't raise no fool. Let's do it. Let's give it a shot. Test the market. Why do I tell you that story? I'll tell you why. Because the Journal of Awesome has outsold all of my books. I'm an author, though. You know that, right? Like, that's my job. So my point is, like, the book I've written with no words in it has actually outsold the book I've written with words in it. That's crazy. But it makes sense. It makes sense. Because in our brains, we have an area called our visual cortex. Okay? And inside the visual cortex, you have an area called Area 17. When you see a friend that you haven't seen in a few months here this morning, Area 17 lights up. When you write a little journal entry about that at night, Area 17 lights up again. And if you read your own journal, it lights up a third time. That's why I call it the 20-minute replay. You are literally replaying for your brain the positive experience. You're doubling or tripling it inside your own head. That's number 2. Remember I said there was 3. This is the third and final one. The third and final thing you can do in 20 minutes or less a day to prime your brain for positivity is reading 20 pages of fiction. Almost everyone I know says, I want to read more. I wish I had time. It's specifically fiction, by the way. The Annual Review of Psychology says that when you read fiction, not my stuff's all nonfiction. I mean like real literature, like fiction. You actually pop those mirror neurons in your brain. You grow your abilities to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to be understanding. All those softer skills that make us great leaders and make us great faculty and make us great administrators. All those great skills that we need to work with our partners and our teams and our homes and everyone that we're around, they grow because we live another life. As George R.R. Martin wrote, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones, he has this great quote. He says, a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. So I talk to people about reading. It makes sense I'm passionate about reading. Okay, I'm in the world of books and stuff like that. People are like, oh, it makes sense you're passionate, but like I can't find the time. So I'm like, well, what if you just read 20 pages a night? Like just like make it 20 pages. You can make it an easy book. You can have big font. You can have pictures if you want. It's fine. You know. It doesn't have to be a certain kind of book, just as long as it's fiction. And then they say, well, I don't know how to choose a book. That's what people say to me next. They're like, well, I don't know how to pick a book. I go to whatever's in a big pile at the airport, or like whatever's on the Heather's Picks table at Chapters. I don't know how to pick a book. And so I looked into this challenge, okay? I was like, really? You don't know how to pick a book? Like, I always get some people just recommend them. But then I looked into it. Turns out 500,000 new books are published every single year, which means that over 1,000 books are published every single day. And that doesn't even include the self-published industry, which is another 500,000. Okay, so it's 1 million altogether if you include that. So over 1,000 new books come out every single day. No wonder it's like a needle in a haystack, right? So I was thinking about this problem for a long time, and I was like, how do we help people find the specific book? So I actually ended up starting up a totally brand new thing called 3 Books. It's a new podcast I started. And the whole point of this is I sit down with people like Judy Blume or Mitch Albom or David Sedaris, or I find these like inspirational people that are like, big authors, big readers. I sit down with them and I just say, give me 3 books that you think everybody should read that changed your life. I just do it as like a fun public service thing. There's no ads or anything. It's just like literally a chat. I record it and then we release it, and that's it. It's just a way for you to find the next book to actually change your life. Together, these are what I call the big 3, okay? These are what I call the 3 exercises anybody could do. Anybody could do if you just take 20 minutes a day and do it for 20 days in a row. It takes 3 weeks to develop a habit. You do it for 20 minutes a day for 20 days in a row. If you can do a happiness practice, a small thing, for that long, it becomes part of your DNA. It becomes part of your habits. What is the power of doing an exercise like this every single day for a period of time? Well, to show you that practice in real life, I brought a little video to show you. a little video to just demonstrate the power of getting one of these tiny positive behaviors, these little habits into our lives every single day. So, where are we so far? Let's think about it. We got two kinds of people in this room right now, I think. I can kind of see it in the eyes and the heads as I look out. There's the first kind of person. You're like the head nodder. You're like with me. I can see you. You're like nodding your head. You're like, I get this. I like this stuff. I get this stuff. I'm mentioning positive psychology. People are like, yeah, I know about this. I read a book about that or whatever. People are head nodding. There's a head nodding contingent. Thank you, guys. I love you. Head nodding and clapping, even better. Then there's another contingent, and I know this contingent too because I'm kind of like part of this group. They're like the head tilter. They're too polite to shake their head or like throw stuff at me or like disagree openly. But there's part of them that are like, you know what? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. I can't just stuff a 20-minute new thing in my life. You don't know how busy I am. You have no idea what my schedule is. You just waltz in here and tell us what to do. As if I can really do that. What, go for a walk? That's your big idea? You know, like this is, and then the head tilter's got a point. They're like, you know what? I don't really, I don't know if I have time. Or how about this one? If it was that easy, don't you think I would already do it? Don't you think I've heard this before. I know I should do it. I just don't do it. Because it's not as easy as you make it sound. And I like that person too, because they have a legitimate point. They're like, yeah, there's all these barriers between today where we're sitting here, we're all together and we're having a good time, and the day I actually start doing one of these things. And it's easy for us to all walk out of here and think, okay, I can do one of those things, but it's harder to actually do it. And so what do you label that whole suite of emotions, the hesitation, the doubt, the worry? What do you call all that? What do you label all that? What would you call that? Procrastination, that's a great word. What was your name? Annette, here's a book for you for being brave. Come on up. Whoa. There you go. Thank you. Procrastination, that's a good word. Yes? Pessimistic, good word. Anyone else? Excuses, doubt, what was that? Afraid, I like that one. I was thinking that one too. I was thinking fear. And you know why I was thinking fear? Because we all have fear. We all have fear. We all have fear. In fact, for most of my life, this was my biggest fear, was anything to do with water, anything to do with swimming. At one of those teacher barbecues, I'm not kidding, I actually fell into a swimming pool when I was about 5 years old, and I had this traumatic experience, and that compounded with the fact that I had ear infections my whole life. So I had ear infections my whole life, which means I had tubes my whole life. I couldn't get water in my ears. And I had this traumatic experience. So the whole point is I never actually learned to swim. I had lots of reasons to swim. Everyone else I knew swam. But I had this fear. I had all these things, these hesitations, these worries, all these excuses. And so I did what most of us do. I kind of made this little chart for myself. I said, can I swim? No. So do I want to swim? No. So do I actually do it? Do I swim? No. This is how we think about anything. Capability leads to motivation, leads to action. Motivation leads to action. I didn't even own a bathing suit. I would just go hang out at the barbecue at the pool party, and I'd go on the treadmill if my friends in college wanted to go to the gym or whatever. I was like, you know what? I don't have any rivers I need to cross in Toronto, so I'm good. I can go through life without learning this thing, no problem. Just like you can go through life without ever journaling or whatever, reading fiction or whatever, without ever going for a walk, whatever that stuff is. Forget it. But then what happened to me was kind of interesting. My first year living downtown Toronto, by myself for the first time, big city for the first time, in a 500 square foot apartment, I didn't go on one date at all. It took me a whole year before I went on online dating sites and I tried to kind of get out there again. And then it took another year after that to meet somebody who I liked, who also liked me. Because you need both. You don't realize that at first. You're like, oh, I like this person. I'll go on a second date again. And then you're like, they ghosted me. They have never heard from them since then. I guess they didn't like me. So then you go, I met someone. So this is 2 years in now, right? I met someone. Her name was Leslie. She's a teacher in the Toronto District School Board, and we like each other. So we go on a second date. And on the second date over dinner that night, as I was taking a sip of water, on the second date, she says to me, "So, Neil, do you like swimming?" It's funny to you. I was like, not really. I didn't want to tell her I couldn't swim. I was too scared. I was too embarrassed. Too embarrassed to tell her that. So I just said, not really. And you know what she says to me? She says, "No, swimming is my favorite thing to do in the world." You see, my family has had a cottage for generations on an island not too far from here. And she's like, every single morning in the summer, my 80-year-old grandparents and my 5-year-old cousins, there's like 20 of us, my whole kind of family, we jump in the lake and we swim around the island. And then she says, I guess you can't come. Well, that night, without thinking about whether I could do it or whether I want to do it, I just did it. I signed up for adult learn to swim classes at the downtown City of Toronto pool. You obviously haven't seen the pool. It was risky for a couple reasons. So that Tuesday night, let me go back on stage. By the way, as I'm walking back on stage, can everyone just do 1 5-second stand up, sit down, just to get the blood moving for the last couple minutes? Stand up, sit down. Because I know it is hot in here. And so I go in that Tuesday night. It's the first ever swimming classes of my life, right? The adult learn to swim classes. I got my life jacket on. I got my goggles strapped to my face. And I kind of walk in there on the pool deck. And you know who's waiting for me out there? Not Leslie. 10 other people who sucked at swimming. It was like we had trust and solidarity. And then the teacher says, she's like, just get in the pool. It's 3 feet. It's 3 feet deep. You can keep your life jacket on. You can keep your goggles on, and I'll even give you a flutter board. So literally, we get in the pool. It's like up to here, and we just kind of walk around, holding the flutter board, which I don't really need. And then she's like, "Thank you very much. It's been half an hour. I'll see you next week." I was like, "Oh, that was it." So I get out of the pool. I dry my shins off, and I go home. And then the next week I come back, and it's the same thing. I got the goggles on, the life jacket, the whole deal. I go walking on the pool deck, and she's like, "Same as last week. Just get in the water, keep the life jacket on, keep the goggles on. I'll even give you the flutter board again." So I get in, start walking around, and she's just like, "If you're feeling comfortable, you can go a little deeper." It's like, okay, I go a little deeper, go a little deeper. Then all of a sudden, "Thank you very much. It's been half an hour. I'll see you next week." I'm like, there's only 8 lessons. I'm done 2 of them. But it was really weird.